You're listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast brought to you by DraftKings. Great deal going on. You put down a deposit, you can get up to $1,000 in free plays. That's simple, that easy. William Brad Alice joining. Hello, William. How you doing?
I'm okay, Michael. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Appreciate a couple things came up, so I had to move the schedule around a little bit, but appreciate you making time with us today, Brad.
No worries.
All right, let's talk a little bit of football first. We talked a lot of basketball. And just looking at this depth chart and, what it is going into camp, am I crazy to think that this team should be significantly better this year just based off the quarterback play?
I guess it depends what your definition of significant is. Do I think they're going to win more games? Yeah. Do I think they'll be more competitive, more games? Yeah. Does that mean it could only be 3 wins? Yeah. There's still a long way to go in revamping this roster. But when you look at a minimum, the quarterback position where, again, if let's say McLeod was your best quarterback last year, he's probably your 3rd best quarterback this year.
Right.
And that, again, is a significant step up. The receiving room should be a little bit better. Let's hope the line is better, the running back room. The big thing is, what have they done on the defensive side of the ball to make themselves better, and how will they adjust to the new defensive coordinator? But yes, I mean, last year it was a bad roster. It's still not a great roster, but it's an improved roster. A lot of that is youth, though. So how quickly can you get them ready for D1 college football? So there's still a lot of questions, but I don't think, if we're just looking at raw talent, there's any way you can deny that this group is better than it was last year.
Looking at this is staying with the passing game, looking at this on paper, and again, I realize the games aren't played on paper, but looking at it on paper, I think you could make the case that this is the most talented receiving unit since 98. And I know that we've talked about this a little bit, but you look at it, Jacob Cowan coming in, caught for almost 1,400 yards at UTEP. Granted, UTEP. You've got the highest rated wide receiver in U of A history, and T-Mac coming in. You've got a plethora of other guys who are 4-star receivers, whether that's a Speedy Luke, a Kevin Green. And then on top of that, you got a Dorian Singer who flashed last year and was probably their best wide receiver by the end of the day. So, again, I get that it's on paper, but I think you can easily make the case that this is a really, really talented group you got here.
If all of them live up to their star ranking, then I'd agree with you. It's the most talented since 98. I mean, Stoops had some pretty good receiver rooms. Let's not discount that.
Correct.
And literally 1.5, 2 of these guys are proven. But, yes, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot to work with. It reminds me a lot of when Stoops brought in Terrell Reese and that group.
Terrell Turner.
Terrell Turner.
Terrell Reese was one of them.
And who was the other one?
There was a third one.
Dale Shandy. Yeah, I mean, that was a really loaded recruiting class, and they were all kind of okay.
Right.
So those are 4-star kids, though. So, let's hope that they have a little more output than that group, but certainly the talent is there. Now, do you have a quarterback who can get them the ball? We think so. Does he have a line that can give him the time to get them the ball? That might be the big question.
Well, I think that's the question. You've got some skill returning on the offensive line. Peyton Fears has started a ton of games, obviously, at tackle. Josh Baker finished the year pretty strong interior. You got Jonas Sabanea coming in that we've talked about, again, that I think that you're probably going to be seeing a lot of this year. But there's a lot, like you said, the offensive line, I think, is the major question mark because it's fairly easy to pencil in a lot of these guys at certain positions. The offensive line, though, is different because, there's basically 2 spots that are spoken for sure.
Yeah, and if you look at it, they've got some returning guys, but how good were they last year? And part of it is I don't think we know. Because when you did have a gun-shy quarterback Was he gun shy because the line was bad, or was the line bad because he was gun shy? So I think, again, there are a lot of questions with the line. And, we also, there's this, we forget that guys improve or guys fail to improve from the year before. I mean, even if you're talking upperclassmen, this is a different coaching regime, a different weight training program. So we don't know how long it takes for things to click in Brennan Carroll's system. We don't know how far behind were some of these guys on strength and conditioning. And frankly, the one thing you do see is occasionally when you have upper class offensive linemen, they just find that grown man strength in their early 20s. It happens.
Right.
We're so used to skill position guys or basketball players who are fully formed human beings and athletes pretty early in their career. But when you're a lineman, a lot of times you just hit a point in your early 20s where it's easier to get thicker. It's easier to put on muscle.
Matt, are you speaking from experience?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it happens again at 30. It happens again at 40. And in about 6 months, I'll tell you how thick you get at 50.
Okay. So offensively, though, I think it's fair to say that we think that this should be a significantly better unit. I'm not saying it's going to be a significantly better team, but just offensively, I think you got a lot more to work with, and you have a quarterback. I mean, last year, with all due respect to Gunnar Cruz and to Will Plummer, you watched Gunnar Cruz and, like we talked about, everything seemed like a 3-yard pass or a 50-yard heave out of bounds. Will Plummer, the game just looked like it was a little too fast for him at times. So DeLora certainly doesn't have any of those concerns coming in. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, you got to find somebody that can get a pass rush. It's been a while since Arizona's had a consistent guy that could, you might even have to go back to Scooby Wright since.
I mean, you saw flashes of it with, was it Kylan Wilbon? And then he could never duplicate it.
Right.
I mean, if you want to really go back from a defensive line perspective, it's the old group that Rob Lance and I dubbed the Cowboys from Hell, and that was Brooks, Reed, DeAndre Reed, and
Ricky Elmore.
That was the last time I think they consistently got a pass rush from the defensive end position. And frankly, let's not forget the outside Earl Mitchell in the middle there, who opened things up for guys. So you're right. And again, this defense will be different. I think again we're going to see variations of the 3-4, the 3-3-5. So you may be getting outside linebackers blitzing. But you certainly need a consistent pass rush, especially in college football, where I'm not convinced this DB group can be on an island that long. I mean, you can, in the NFL, you have some talented guys who can play by themselves, but in college football, you have to get a pass rush.
Now, and I think there's about 3 or 4 guys that you look to and you say, I'd like to see an improvement this year, and we're going to get to those in just a second. But if you wanted to bet on it, I'm not sure you can bet on this, but you would go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. All right, so you put down a deposit. You can get up to $1,000 in free plays. That's simple, that easy. You got to be 21 and up, Arizona only. Got a gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. They'll get you taken care of. Again, I don't think that you can bet on that there, but if there was a sports book where you could bet it, it would be on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. All right, so I'm going to run by a couple names right here for you, Brad, and just tell me what you'd like to see, what you think are realistic expectations. Jalen Harris first. Obviously, Sean Harris's kid's been around forever. What would you like to see?
I think ideally in a perfect world, Jalen Harris would finish out his career as a fringe all Pac-12 type player.
Right.
I'd like to see between 7 sacks, 8 sacks, maybe a spike more, but really if you can get into that neighborhood, a guy who other defenses have to at least account for.
Right.
And if you can do that, then that's going to free up a lot. I think he has the ability. He just never has been able to put it quite together. But again, a lot of that is how many DCs has he had? How many? Right. How much help has he had? There's been a lot of factors in it, but I'd like to see him kind of live up to at least the raw athletic ability that we know he and his brother, frankly, possess.
Right. A guy that I'm very fascinated to see this come in year is Hunter Echols too. Now again, USC transfer, didn't do a ton at USC. I get all of that, but at the end of the day, it is USC. He was really good in camp. He got after the passer during the spring game. I'd really like to see what he can do out there as well.
Yeah, you throw that in, you throw in the defensive tackle from UCLA, and those three guys at least give you legit upper level Pac-12 athleticism.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you're an upper level Pac-12 player. Don't get me wrong, but we have seen where Arizona has had high level play from guys who are lesser athletes, and you mentioned one, Scooby Wright. There's a reason Scooby Wright dominates the XFL and the USFL, but not the NFL, and that's raw athleticism. And unfortunately for him, an amazing football player who's just not an amazing athlete. Very good athlete, obviously. These three guys, and you throw in maybe a few others, and Jason Harris maybe one, are elite athletes. Now you have to get them. Why couldn't Hunter Echols make a bigger impact at USC? Now, some of it was the guys playing above him, but, so can he be schemed into that? Can he, with, again, some more consistent coaching, possibly be that guy? As there wasn't always we weren't seeing the highest quality of USC coaching that we've ever seen.
Right.
In LA. So again, can he be a guy who can make a difference? He can. I don't know if he will, but I certainly am willing to bank on that level of an athlete over trying to bank on a guy who's just really, good hard worker and,
right. Just the right way.
Yeah. Parker, no offense, but Parker Zellers, I'd rather bank on Hunter Echols.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Now, Keon Bars is a player that, missed a little bit of time, but he's showing up on some watch lists right now. I think on paper, just by acclaim, he's probably the best returning player. But again, it's, we're not talking guys that have put up a lot of numbers. It'd be nice to see him be able to really cause some havoc in the interior there.
Yeah, and again, I caution people with numbers with the interior defensive linemen. You cannot have a tackle or a half tackle or a sack and completely dominate a football game at that position. And it's one of the few on defense that you can. Because if you can control your gap, if you can force guys wide, if you can force a double team, which frees up a linebacker or a DN to get in, then you've done your job.
Right.
And I've seen people where they don't have many sacks at the interior. I don't need sacks at the interior defensive lineman. It's just like, it's kind of like saying, well, my quarterback didn't rush for a whole lot of yards. Well, we didn't ask him to. Now, that being said, if he could free himself up and get to the quarterback a few times, that's better than nothing. But yeah, as long as he can be a guy who, again, can dominate his gap, can occasionally either need another blocker, whether that's another lineman, a running back to chip on him, that's going to open things up for everybody else. And then whatever he plays plays he makes on top of that is just kind of gravy.
All right, so let's get to the DBs a little bit here. Joseph Davis says at least the DBs will have another year together, maybe better cohesion. You do return almost everybody in the secondary. At the end of the day, though, I think the guys that really kind of flashed at the end, Traden Stukes obviously was a walk-on that really earned a lot of PT at the end of the season. He was big time towards the end of the year. He's going to be opposite Christian Roland Wallace. You got Christian Young back there as well. What do you look for out of the DBs this year?
Just an improvement overall. And again, I think the corners were
talent like, in your opinion. Is the talent good enough at the defensive back position?
I don't know. Frankly, I don't know how much of their deficiencies was scheme, talent, preparation, dedication. It's just so hard to tell.
Right.
Frankly, I mean, it's a weird thing because all DBs are fast.
Right.
Some are faster than others. You can see a physical DB, but really until you get them out there and get them in a competent scheme, you just don't know.
Right.
I've seen people super critical of Chuck Cecil's coaching. I've seen people super critical of Dwayne Walker's coaching, super critical of, Don Brown's coaching. But maybe you see that they did what they could with the talent they have. So I don't know. I mean, Traden Stukes looked pretty good. But again, we're talking a guy who was a lightly recruited walk-on.
Right.
I think in a perfect world, I'd like to see him be the third corner.
Right.
Come in and play some slot corner play, whatever this scheme is going to do. But if he's your best guy, he's your best guy. And that's just indicative of the problems. I mean, there's a reason they've got 147 defensive backs committed already.
Right.
And
they're all long. They're all like 6'3",
which is great.
Right.
Because I love me a 12 DB, but
right.
But there's a reason you're loading up on these guys. It's because you don't think you have enough there. I mean, because what they legitimately have, 4 or 5 already committed.
Yeah.
And 3 or 4 of their top targets are still DBs.
And on top of that too, you're already bringing in a couple guys like an Ephesus Prysock, who was by the way, great name, also a 4-star kid. So yeah, you could tell that they looked at the DB room and they're like, yeah, we need some more players here.
Well, and even look at last year when they were bringing in transfers, the kid from Notre Dame, the kid from Northwestern. That was it. Try to get some immediate help. So I think much like the entire roster, it's a work in progress. The bizarre thing is I feel much better about the defensive line than I do, I think, any other position on the defense, at least in terms of this season. And that's something we haven't been able to say at Arizona in a long time.
Because especially too at the linebacker spot, it's kind of an open season when I look at it. I mean, you've got an Anthony Solomon, you've got players like that, but I don't know that anybody there is really totally proven to the level where you're like, okay, you can just stamp him in right there.
And we don't know how many are going to be on the field.
Right. That's the other thing.
I think you're going to see a lot of times where you just have one linebacker out there, to be honest.
Right.
And I don't know what Johnny Nansen's, but if they're really going with 2 linebackers in the base defense, and what happens when they go with an extra DB? I'm guessing you're pulling a linebacker and not a pass rusher. So, so I think it's an important position. I think it's a position in flux. There's a lot of interesting young kids there, including some of the kids coming in. But we'll see how that position eventually shakes out. And I don't know, but last year they really leaned on Anthony Pandy quite a bit, and he's not here anymore. So you'll see who emerges. And we've seen some kids transfer out as well, which I liked Jabbar Triplett. I thought he could be a good player, but just wasn't meant to be.
I agree. All right, now we're going to switch over to some basketball right there. But before that, Brad, the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. Here's the deal. Right now, Arizona over or under 2.5 wins. I like the over. I think that they're going to get that. I think Arizona is going to be in that 4, maybe challenge for 5 wins. What say you?
I would take the over at this point because, frankly, the schedule's weird. It's a schedule where you can really go into every game and not win any of them. And it's also one where you can go in and I think Arizona has at least an outside shot at winning 9 of them.
Right, for sure. I mean, there's no game. There's basically only a few times that you try to get. There's basically only a few times games that you look at and say Arizona's got no chance.
Yeah, and it's weird because again, this could end up being. I mean, realistically, they can go 0-3 or 3-0 in the non-conference.
Right.
San Diego State's not as good as they were last year, but you get them on the road, breaking in a new everything.
Right.
You get a 1AA team, and we saw a bad 1AA team beat them last year.
That's the point. It's a bad 1AA.
And you're getting a really good one this year, but it's still at the end of the day a 1AA team. Maybe they're more like a MAC team than a traditional 1AA team, but Arizona has done fairly well against MAC teams with some bad football teams.
Right.
I just don't know. Mississippi State has to come out of their comfort zone again. So. Yeah, I would take the over. I don't think it's going to be that far over, but again, I could change my mind completely after San Diego State game. I could be like, this coaching's not what we thought.
You reserve, but you know what? That's why you want to get on the DraftKings Sportsbook app because you can put that in there right there. And you know what? If you don't like your bet, you have the ability to hedge it. So there you go, right there. Code word PHNX. All right. Let's move it over to a little bit of U of A basketball. A guy that I think is very intriguing for this coming season that nobody really talks about a ton, other than the fact to say that nobody really talks about him a ton, is Adama Ball. Now, you saw some of the highlights. I'm sure you did too, what he was doing over in France, getting to the basket, dunking, hitting threes. He, to me, is the great wild card on this entire team, William, where if you were to tell me that he averages 11 a game, if you were to tell me that he was averaging 4.5 a game, I could kind of see both.
If you tell me he's the best player on the team next year, I might believe it.
Yeah.
And if you tell me he's transferring in December, I would believe it.
Right.
I have no idea.
Right.
Because he's barely 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We've barely seen him, and when we have, he's looked effective. But he's long, he's athletic. He appears to be a guy who has a variety of skills, from ball handling to shooting to driving. So yeah, I think my guess is it's somewhere in between. My guess is I still think he's going to end up starting at the 3.
Okay.
Um,
So what you're looking at? All right. Well, let me ask you this then. So who's not?
I think Larson comes off the bench.
You think Larson comes off the bench? Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Because I think he's comfortable in that role.
Right.
And again, could I see a situation where Ball might be your instant offense off the bench too. But I think there's a reason they handled Ball the way they did last year. But yeah, I think Ball's either your starting 3 or he's your scorer off the bench. And I think either way, you're in a pretty good shape at that position.
Yeah, and I think with Ball, doesn't Ball feel like the guy that's basically your Gonzaga type player that, you get him from overseas, he's a little bit under the radar, and he comes in and he's young, he shows some flashes, and by the time he's an upperclassman, he looks like he's going to be a lottery pick.
We call that a Gonzaga player, but I think everything you say about Gonzaga, we also said about Lute Olson.
It's true.
Isn't he one of those Lute guys who?
Yeah, good point.
Could you see him being Michael Dicker? Not the same type of player, but the guy who
that same career trajectory
probably should have played a little more as a freshman. You could say this about Ray O's. You could say this about some guys who transferred out too, but was better than his role was last year. But other guys were just better positioned. And then in year 2, it's like, oh yeah, we got this guy.
Right.
I mean, because remember, Dickerson barely played, and then he blew up against like ASU in the game everyone was suspended. And then by a sophomore, you're like, oh, that's an NBA player.
Right. For sophomore year, he's averaging 11 a game, and you're like, okay, he's going to be an 18-point per game guy next year, and that's exactly what he was.
Ray O's was the same guy.
JT had a little bit in that as well, because wasn't he his freshman year against like Washington?
Yeah.
Didn't he go for like 22 or something like that?
You want to go way back? We can start talking like Wayne Womack's of the world.
Yes, right.
But that's a different era. But again, when you are recruiting international guys and when you're kind of doing things a little differently than the big guys do, this happens with. We see this a lot with mid-majors. Now, a lot of times what happens is you blow up as a sophomore, you transfer. But this is, we're going to see, I think, more and more of this, especially as a lot of the one-and-done guys go to play for Ignite or one of those. You're going to see guys who are patient their first year because they know they're going to play their second year, as opposed to, oh, I didn't play much my first year, so I'm leaving. Justin Simon would have been this guy.
He was the one guy, too, that felt like he was done. Right.
Yeah, thankfully, Gabe York became that guy, and it really took Gabe another year. But, we're so quick to write off guys who don't play their first year. And now sometimes that's true. Sometimes the staff writes them up. They're like, no, this guy doesn't have it. No offense, but I think that's what happened to Noel.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Ball.
Oh, I'm not offended.
I think Ball. I met him and his family. They're tuning in. Much like Tyreek Hill can't leave the Chiefs from his mouth. I think I don't know, but I think Ball was a strategic plan to just bring him along slowly, add weight, get him acclimated to America, and then unleash him this year. And whether, again, unleash is 8 points, 11 points, 14 points, I don't know. But I think he factors in pretty heavily to this team.
Yeah, I do as well. And the other guy, too, we've saw a little bit of the highlights of. I don't know that he factors in big time this year, but I do think that he's going to be promising down the road. Again, is Borovichinen. I think that's how it's pronounced right there, so I'm actually happy that I got that. But one thing, though, with Borovichinen, just watching some of those little clips, and again, they're just clips, so take it for what it's worth. He definitely looks sturdier than I expected him to look. And he got by Kirk Kriisa, which showed me that Kirk Kriisa was in vintage Kirk Kriisa defensive form.
Am I crazy?
Yes.
Or is there a little Ricky Anderson in Philly B?
I don't hate that. Hate that.
About 6'9", little sturdier than you give him credit for.
Right.
I don't know if he's going to have Ricky's outside shot.
But he's also looks like he's already a better handle. He has a better handle than he does too.
People forget Ricky came in as a small forward and left as a center.
Right.
And Ricky Anderson was a pretty good player who gets overlooked because he didn't have the post professional career.
Right. But he was
yeah,
a solid player. Yes.
But if you can get, if you can get 2/3 Ricky Anderson out of Philly B, I'll be happy with that. If he's a guy, but again, he could be the Adama Ball of this year's class, the guy who takes a little while to develop, but as a sophomore or junior, really starts to showcase what he has.
Yeah, I think that's probably what you're looking for, too. And one thing, though, you got to give Tommy Lloyd on this is that Tommy Lloyd is, again, renowned as the best international recruiter, and probably so if he's going over to Macedonia or, Estonia or wherever these places are, Latvia, and he's bringing a kid back, especially with as circumspect as he is about offering kids, he obviously sees that this person can be a big-time contributor for them.
Yeah, if you look at, and again, I'd have to do a deeper dive, but my snapshot of Gonzaga was they didn't have a lot of international guys frustrated with their roles and end up leaving after a year. Now, depending on what program you're in internationally, it's a different mindset. You play for the junior team, and then you try to work your way. It's not like here where, you can be 12 years old and there's a bidding war for you for AAU teams.
Right.
Where kids, and there's a pressure on kids, as I think we peel the layers off of NIL and things, you can find there's a lot of 13-year-olds paying the rent with AAU shoe money.
No joke.
You don't have that because, again, it's above board what you can give the families, but guys are a lot more patient with their pursuit of playing time because that's just the system over there. And it used to be the system here, too. If you went to modern day, you knew, okay, I might make varsity as a freshman, but I there's a 5-star guy who's an NBA lottery pick ahead of me. I don't have to transfer to Orange Lutheran to play.
Right.
I'm going to be patient. And that's something that's a little lost. I think that's why a lot of coaches like the international players, because they're more than willing to, bide their time and prove themselves.
All right, well, let me tell you a little bit about Four Peaks. That is the official beer of PHNX right there. You can enter the Toast of the Month sweepstakes at gophnx.com. You must be 21 years or older. Enjoy responsibly. And Foku is now partnering with PHNX. They are a leader in sports merchandise and collectibles. Foco, F-O-C-O, has got you covered from the best Arizona merchandise. They have officially licensed gear for men, women, and kids, and everything from bobbleheads to swimsuits to Crocs. You name it, they got it. I like stuff like that. Feels like something Anthony Chimino should be doing.
Yeah.
I think it could be good. But, Brad, as always, I know we're up against the clock right here, but again, appreciate you coming on. We'll be back on our normal time next Tuesday. But again, thanks for pinching and hopping in right here.
Yes. Thanks for accommodating my schedule.
You got it. For William Brad Alice, I am Mike Luke. You have been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.